These are the podcast objectives overview for Chapter 7, Cognition. So the beginning of the chapter is going to start out with explaining how mental images are involved in the process of thinking. So how our brain basically takes visual images that we see and converts them to data that our brain can use, and what that whole process looks like, and then how we turn that around into forming our thinking process, and look at what is meant by the terms concepts and prototypes, and how these influence our thinking. They're just typically ways of representing our world that we come to know in our culture and in our language, so that we can think about things, right? We'll also identify some methods that people use to solve problems and make decisions. So pretty much like some decision-making strategies and various problem-solving, not equations per se, but different elements that help us solve and relate to the world around us. We'll look at common barriers to successful problem solving. Why is it that people get stuck in their thinking patterns? And then this can often impede progress and problem solving. We'll take a look at some characteristics of creative and divergent thinking, which is just a sort of a difference in how we approach the world and how we approach problems around us. What do creative thinkers have in common? So it's a pretty interesting topic, a popular topic. And then we'll dive into looking at the different theories on intelligence. So we'll compare and contrast some different theories that exist as to what intelligence is exactly, and then how we go about measuring it. We'll look at different ways that we can evaluate the quality of an intelligence test. We use IQ today for a lot of different things and for a lot of different reasons, such as school settings or mental health. And so it's important that the validity of these tests be scrutinized and can stand up to that scrutiny. So taking a look at some of that, which will then lead us into defining then what is meant by intellectual disability, opposite of that giftedness, and then emotional intelligence, which doesn't get talked about a lot, but is certainly important in relating to other people. We'll take a look at the influence of heredity and the environment on the development of intelligence. So how much of our intelligence comes from our genes and how much comes from the environment that we grow up in, what effect do those two have on intelligence. And then the latter part of the chapter will get into language, looking at the different elements and structure of language, the phonetics of sound. So a lot of different concept mapping here. This is great for teachers because you will actually use a lot of this when you become a teacher. Understanding this is crucial to understanding language development in children. And so looking at how that language does develop over childhood, pretty much from infancy on, from the moment an infant can start to make sounds on their own to putting together words and strands of words into sentences, and then higher order thinking in terms of meaning. And then we'll evaluate whether or not language influences how people think. So depending upon the language that you're using, can it affect what you're actually thinking? So we'll look at some bilingual people, research looking at bilingual people and how they think differently depending upon the language that they're thinking in. So it's kind of cool research there. We'll summarize the research on the ability of animals to communicate and use language. We've known for some time now that animals do this. They're in fact pretty interesting subjects to study, especially those that have more sophisticated language, like whales and different primates. And then lastly, we'll identify personal cognitive biases and determine how to prevent them from negatively impacting decision making. So we all have different biases that impede how we make decisions. We're biased in one way, shape, or form. How can we be more aware of these biases so that they don't negatively affect the decisions that we make? And that wraps up Chapter 7, Cognition.